'76 boxing team, man.
The greatest ever.
Yeah, that was a true hands down. So is that where your love from boxing came from Cincinnati, or was it just you were a fan of the sport?
My love for boxing came from Cincinnati with all the rumbles. I got tired of running from them guys from Avondale and guys from Walnut Hills and Evanston and Cumminsville.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Watching the episodes of Conversation with Brent. I want to invite you into another intimate conversation with Mr. Sid Kennedy. How you doing, Sid?
Oh, I'm great, Brent. How are you?
I'm good. Sid is originally from Cincinnati, such as myself. You hear me talk about Cincinnati all the time. But he came here to attend Morehouse, and we're going to take a little dig into Sid's past, his present, and his future on Conversations with Brent. Sid, let me ask you this, bro. What made you come to Atlanta?
Well, I had looked at Atlanta because I had heard stories about it being, a more progressive outlet for African Americans. The Cincinnati Cool Jazz Festival,
right,
which also performed here in Atlanta as well.
Okay.
At Fulton County, the old Fulton County Stadium. And we would come down here and, work the shows here and everything. And then as I got into college, I said, well, I'm not going to University of Cincinnati, you see, under no circumstances.
Right.
So I came here and I looked at Morehouse and I was intrigued by the level of young men, who were more solidified in areas of business and sports and commerce and
right,
economics, and the mentality of the young men were different than the boys that we grew up with,
right,
and so to speak. And so my mindset and personality changed at that point. And when I began to, get invited to social functions and going to areas like Cascade, a part of Southwest Atlanta, and going to an executive of Coca-Cola, which is a Fortune 500 company, African American. I had never seen that before. Mm-hmm. And, I go and see all these $1 million homes, these subdivisions of all these $1 million and up homes, and black kids, throwing the frisbee and football in the front yard and all that. And I was just totally amazed,
right,
how African Americans live and their economic position being so much greater than black Cincinnati. And, I don't mean to say that in a derogatory way, which I've been accused of in the past. If you look at some of the conversations and dialogue I've had on social media, I don't want it to structure seem like I'm, down in, black Cincinnati, my hometown, so to speak. It's just that there are more opportunities, lucrative opportunities, for African Americans to do their own, as we say in the streets, their own thing,
right,
so to speak, in terms of business and, commerce and everything from a corporation to a nightclub,
Yeah.
And so that is one of the main principles that brought me here to Atlanta.
Okay. And that's one of the reasons we moved from Cincinnati to Atlanta, was to get our kids somewhere more progressive. And like you said, Cincinnati, I love it. It's my foundation. It's a great place to raise a family, but for my kids, I wanted more. And so I want to talk a little bit about what you do now, but then we're going to go into your passion. So right now you work for Don King Productions, correct?
Right.
And what all do you do for them?
Actually, how I got started with Don King Productions, if you noticed, many years in the concert business, and that being my first summer job,
Okay.
So Cincinnati Music Festival. So as the 90s approached, 96, when the Olympics were here in Atlanta, Don King and his staff were here scouting fighters, Olympic hopefuls, and trying to scout them and sign them once they turn professional and what have you.
Right.
So Don is from Cleveland and
Yeah.
Cincinnati, and we had a lot of common friends throughout the Ohio boxing community. And I told him, I just come out of college, and my interests in the fight game from a business perspective, because my fighting days are behind me, but my interests in the business aspect in terms of media and journalism and things of the sort. And he said, come on board. And so since then, my duties entails of working the press room.
Okay.
We do the press conferences, the press conference calls with media worldwide. I consider myself a night owl because at 3 a.m. here in Atlanta, in the States, it's like 6 in the evening in Beijing, China.
Right.
So I am up at all hours doing conference calls with media worldwide. And we brief them on the fights, the fighters, the arenas, the particulars of the event, the press conferences, before the fights, the press city tours, sometimes, we have mega fights such in the past as Holyfield Tyson or De La Hoya Trinidad, so to speak. We've done like maybe a 10 or 20 city tour. And we just, try to drum up interest in the promotion of the fights. And, the actual fights themselves, the day of, we do the press credentials. I credential over 600 media members, domestically and foreign press. Everyone from the New York Daily News, Sports Illustrated, the LA Times, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Ring Magazine, you name it. Anybody that applies for media credentials, we provide them. We credential mass media. We also credential a lot of the entertainers. If you look at ringside and you see the Magic Johnsons or the Jay-Z's or the Denzel Washingtons at ringside, that was more or less, my idea for Don King Productions, and that's just something that I did on my own. And, Don and the, brass at DKP was, satisfied. So that's, basically what we do. We take care of, the press, and we have the telephones, the laptops, and all that. We find out what their needs are, in the press room and everything. And then after the fight, we have the post-fight press conference. And, it's just a summary where the members of the media can address questions to the fighters and things of that nature. So that's basically what I do with DKP and Showtime. We were with HBO, but HBO kind of downsized their operation. They eliminated boxing from programming because streaming, is on the rise. So HBO got a boxing period. So we're mainly dealing with Showtime and ESPN.
Okay. So did your love of boxing, because being from Cincinnati, we've had a lot of great boxers come out of Cincinnati. You had Ezra Charles, Aaron Pryor, who else? Tony Tubbs, Ricardo Williams. We have Adrian Bronner, who you're going to share something about coming up soon. But there's been so many boxers that have come out of Cincinnati. Is that where your love started? And one thing I think I mentioned to you before, there was a guy my mother worked with at the post office. He worked with Tony Tubbs and Gary Williams and some of those guys. And when the 1976 Olympic boxing trials was at the Coliseum, my mother was a judge. I don't know if she was the first or one of the first female boxing judges to be at the Olympic trials. And I met the Spinxes and Howard Davis and Sugar Ray Leonard, because that 76 boxing team, man.
The greatest ever.
Yeah, that was a true hands down. So is that where your love from boxing came from Cincinnati, or was it just you were a fan of the sport?
My love for boxing came from Cincinnati with all the rumbles. I got tired of running from them guys from Avondale and guys from Walnut Hills and Evanston and Cumminsville and all that. So, at some point in time, the Aaron Pryors, Tony Tubbses, Tommy Ayers, those guys,
Rodney Watts,
Kendall White, Gary Turner, and those before my era, like the Norman Springs, Big George Turner, Melvin Turnbull, and all these guys, that fought during the Ali era, they were at one time neighbors of mine.
Oh, wow.
So for me to grow up as a kid, 7, 8 years old, and I'm seeing Tony Tubbs run up and down Gilbert Avenue doing his road work, and Tommy Ayers, getting out of Hughes High School, going to the gym, and all that kind of sparked my interest to try boxing. And my dad would have me look at the fights on Wild World of Sports and try to pick up pointers so that I could better defend myself, out in the streets and what have you, And I started going down to the Manual Recreation Center, which is down on Ray Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, the Central Parkway YMCA, the Finley Street Neighborhood House.
Finley Street, yes.
One of the gyms that I trained out of. And being around a lot of fighters and going to competitions and tournaments and things of that nature, that, has always sparked my interest. I mean, even now today, I've got over 5,000 fights in my collection. One of them being the 1976 Olympic trials in Cincinnati, where Aaron Pryor lost a close decision to Howard Davis.
He was robbed. That wasn't no close. He was robbed. They wanted Howard Davis in there more than they wanted Aaron Pryor.
That's true.
So let me ask you this. I'm not a big fight fan, but I do follow a little fight. My brother, James Barnett, and Dad, they were big fight fans. They loved Esteban de Jesus. I think or Salvador Sanchez. He got killed early.
Right.
For me, I think my favorite was Hector Camacho. Hector, the reason I like Hector, he was quick. Now, I didn't like when he started getting too flamboyant, but he was good. But for me, I think my most favorite fight was the Aaron Pryor, Alexis Arguello. Both of those fights, man, were just nonstop. So from you have way more to draw from. Who's your favorite fighter, and what was probably your most favorite fight?
My favorite fighter, I have a old-time favorite fighter.
Okay.
And I have a postmodern favorite fighter. Starting with my old-time favorite fighter is Muhammad Ali. Because Muhammad Ali was not just, a fighter, the greatest. He was Uncle Muhammad to me and my siblings because he and my dad ran together. Dad was one of the first journalists and radio people to do interviews with him because we all were Muslims,
right?
By the way. And, him and Dad, they grew up in the Nation of Islam under the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so we would always go to Chicago, from the Savior's Day conventions. Our good friend Rocky Shabazz and his father and all of us, we always go to Chicago. And so Dad and Muhammad became, real close over the years. And he was an avid caller and visitor to the house, in Cincinnati. And we were trying to get him to come to Crest Hills one year, but, he couldn't make it for some reason or another. But Muhammad Ali was always my favorite fighter, not just a fighter, but as a person, as a humanitarian, and as a family friend. So I'm going to be a little biased and say that Ali, was my favorite.
Well, I don't think you'll get no arguments from anybody on that one. Mm-hmm. Now, who's your postmodern?
Well, postmodern has to be, and he's not really a household name. As a matter of fact, he has since retired. I shouldn't even say postmodern because I don't have a postmodern fighter.
Okay.
But this guy fought back in the 80s. His name was Donald Curry.
I remember Donald Curry.
Yeah, and Donald Curry, was my guy because the first time I saw him on ESPN, he had a style that was reminiscent of mine,
Okay.
And I, grew up watching him and trying to, imitate him and everything like that. And, I would get his T-shirts and wear them to school and that kind of thing. And, the past few years, we have became really close. So Donald is like my brother.
Okay.
So, biasly speaking, I'm going to say Donald Curry because he was at one time the best fighter pound for pound. And I want to bring this to the attention of as many people as possible, the effects after boxing.
Man.
Donald suffers from what we call CTE, which stands for chronic trauma encephalopathy. And that is a disease of the brain when you've taken too many punches, so especially so late in your career when you fought when you should have stopped a long time ago. And, it causes other effects like mood swings and forgetfulness and things like that, So all violent contact sports, football, boxing, CTE is a very big part of an athlete who participates in contact sports years after they retire. So I just want to, put some awareness out there, for, that type of disease.
Yeah, because I was going to say CTE, you may have heard it for those that are watching. It's real big with the NFL now. Tua is one person that's kind of the poster child, unfortunately, now for CTEs. Favorite fight? What's your most favorite fight you ever watched or seen on tape or?
The favorite fight, I have to say, and I have many, but if I had to choose one that I don't never get tired of throwing the DVD tape in and looking at, that's Muhammad Ali, George Foreman.
Okay.
Kinshasa, Zaire, October 30th, 1974. I was 9 years old at the time,
Right.
I was salty because I couldn't go to Africa because at that time, you still have to have, shots and measles and malaria and all these kind of pills and shots you have to take to go over there now. But at that time, I would have to have taken all that, taking me out of school for weeks and, as a little kid, that's just something you cannot do, but if I have a choice of one fight, I can just throw in that Ali Foreman fight and look at that from start to finish a million times without getting tired.
So I'm going to throw out some boxers' names because the one era I liked, most of these boxers come from that era. I'm going to throw out a name and you just tell me something about them or what you feel. So I'm going to start with probably the best known from that era, Sugar Ray Leonard.
Ray Charles Leonard started out boxing in Palmer Park, Maryland, which is a suburb of D.C. Mm-hmm. First time I met Ray, he came to Cincinnati in 1972. At that time, the Olympic trials were held at the Cincinnati Gardens. Ray came to Cincinnati to fight one of my old neighbors, Greg Whaley, who is since deceased, but Ray came to Cincinnati and fought Greg Whaley. Greg won the fight, but Ray was hot because he thought that it was a close fight, but Ray thought that he did enough to win and pull it out. Ray actually lied about his age.
I was going to say, because in 76, he wasn't that old, so 72, he had to be really young.
Ray was like every bit of 14, 15, but Ray lied about his age and fought in the 72 Olympic trials. Ray's trainers were from Cincinnati, a guy by the name of Janks Morton, who had a brother, Vince Morton, that had like stores and shops in the West End, right? Vince Morton Record and Arcade, if you remember that. Well, his brother Janks trained a lot of fighters. Janks was Ray's trainer. And, Ray lied about his age, came to Cincinnati, fought the Olympic trials, and lost a very close decision to Greg Whaley of Cincinnati. And to this day, Ray still swears up and down that he beat Greg, But that's the first time that I had met Ray. And in the 76 Olympic trials, I had, seen him again. And, mind you, being around music, and boxing and things of that sort, being around Dad, hanging out in the Reds clubhouse or the Bengals clubhouse, and seeing all the entertainers, the Michael Jacksons, the Luther Vandrosses, the Sugar Ray Leonards, Muhammad Ali's. Those were not celebrities to me.
Right.
Those were just people that I knew before they blew up, or friends of daddies,
Right.
or personal friends, James Brown, Uncle James to me and my siblings, So I never really looked at them at that light of being celebratory and what have you.
Right.
And, when I saw Ray in the 76 Olympics, I kind of knew that he was going to be something special because he was knocking out guys that nobody could even touch, these Cubans, which have some of the best fighters in the world. And, when Castro, had the helm of Cuba, Cubans were not allowed to turn pro or come to the States, So Cuba has always had a lot of talented fighters, and Ray was knocking them out like nothing, And so when he turned professional and sought after Muhammad Ali's trainer, a gentleman by the name of Angelo Dundee.
Oh, Angelo. Yeah, Angelo.
And he put together Angelo Dundee is his trainer, James Morton, his trainer as well, and a gentleman by the name of Mike Trainer, who was a successful real estate and business icon, typhoon in D.C., and he's the one that negotiated the contract for Ray and CBS for Ray to earn $40,000 for his first professional fight. Now, mind you, back then, that was a lot of money. No fighter in history had ever got that much money for his first debut fight, including Ali. So Ray gets $40,000 his first, professional fight, and then carefully managing him with the right opponents, and then fighting on ABC and the announcing team of Howard Cosell, for example, building Ray up and enhancing his career, calling his fights and what have you. And, the right time was his first professional title shot with welterweight champion Wilfred Benitez.
Man, I used to love me some Wilfred Benitez. And that era to me, and no disrespect to some of the fighters that people consider the greatest now, but in that era, you could not dodge nobody. You had Tommy Hearns, Wilfred Benitez, Marvin Hagler, Thomas Hearns, Sugar Ray Leonard, Aaron Pryor, Alexis Well, you had so many fighters in that time period. You couldn't wait, I'm going to just fight the champ. Because any of them could have been champ at any time, and you couldn't duck nobody. One person that I'm intrigued about is Mike Tyson. And the reason I'm intrigued about Mike Tyson is when he was with Cus D'Amato, is that it? When Cus died and Rooney took over, I always wondered how far Mike could have really went, and we know he went high, if Cus was still around. What's your take on that relationship? Because a lot of people know Mike Tyson's story, and remarkable young man, but just the intimidation factor he fought with, man, it was like you could see fear in guys' eyes when they stepped in the ring with that dude, because he was a savage.
I remember Mike Tyson when he was 16 years old. And from all the tournaments that, we all would fight in Cincinnati, over in Kentucky, the Indiana Black Expo, the Ohio State Fair in Columbus, the State Fair in Columbus was a big boxing tournament.
Oh, yes.
I mean, if you fought in the State Fair, you were ready for the world, And I could see then, Mike had the talent and the potential to be the great champion that he turned out to be even back then. Mm-hmm. Mike would, come in Cincinnati and spar with all the guys, the Nate Tubbses and the Gary Turners and Frank Williams and all these guys, who were, great fighters in their own right. They didn't have the professional careers, that they should have had due to other circumstances, but, those were, really great fighters. I remember in camp one time when Frank Williams, who's a huge high school guy, he dusted Leon Spinks off good, and I mean, These guys were, beating, these world-class fighters,
Right.
in sparring and training. And Mike was doing the same thing. Mike was fighting grown men, at 15 and 16, knocking them over like bowling pins. And, when Mike turned pro, he had the same type of good management that Sugar Ray Leonard had. When Sugar Ray had Mike Trainer negotiating all of his television deals and his contracts and things, Sugar Ray didn't need a promoter.
Right.
Sugar Ray could promote himself.
Like Ali.
Ali was just nice enough to give Don, a shot, at promoting. But, these guys, their works were selling for themselves. And that's why I like about today's fighters, the Oscar De La Hoyas and the Floyd Mayweathers, they have their own in-house promotion.
Yeah.
So they're cutting that middleman out.
And speaking of today's fighters, Adrian Bronner, you said something's coming up with him. What's going on with Adrian?
Adrian is scheduled to fight February 25th. Now, his original opponent pulled out last week. So they just recently got a replacement for him. So Adrian is scheduled to fight February 25th here in Atlanta at State Farm Arena. And, I hope that Adrian can get the help that he needs. He took some time off due to mental health concerns. And, I will say that it is good when you yourself can admit that you do have a problem.
Oh, definitely.
But it's just that with so many fighters from Cincinnati that has so much world-renowned talent, because Adrian, we went to school with his mom, and, when you come from things like, living in the law homes or, in Commonsville and eating cornflakes and water, when you come from that lifestyle,
right.
You work so hard to get to the pinnacle of success, and for you to just throw all that away, that to me is a travesty. That's just like if I, was worth $20 million, and then say there's a possibility I could lose all that, in 5-6 years down the road. That would scare me.
Oh, most definitely.
That would scare me to death, But for some reason, these guys, are lured to the streets, the drugs, the nightclub incidents, where they done punch somebody in the club or they done grope some female and all that. Now, they go to court and the judge say, well, it's going to cost you $800,000 to get out of this mess. Right. You back to zero again. The cases you catch, the people, who have better business sense than you, ripping you off blind.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for example, I had a kid here in Atlanta, that just signed a big multi-fight deal, with ESPN, and it's like $30,000, it's better than working at Dunkin' Donuts, but you still have to have a system of values because boxing is not something you can do forever. You have to have irons in the fire, right. And the advice that I gave him, do not go and buy a brand new Mercedes, Don't, spend it all in these strip clubs and going to Magic City and all that, jewelry and all that. Leave that lifestyle alone. Don't be so quick to live the Rolls Royce and Bentley lifestyle. But no, he does the exact opposite. He buys a brand new 2023 Ford Explorer. He has 5 kids by 3 different women, and he's back to square one.
Man, on that note, I think we done heard enough for one day, because we could go and go and go in this industry. But I want to thank you, man, for all that you do to try to help these young guys. I thank you for all that you do for the civil rights movement. I thank you for all that you do, even for Cincinnati. I appreciate it, because a lot of times people leave a place and they don't associate with, they don't give back. But anybody that knows Sid, he's willing to help any way he can. So we'll make sure we put links to any way you can get in touch with him. And don't forget to check out the Martin Luther King Gala. If you're a fight fan, purchase your tickets to see Adrian Bronner and just support our people, man. It's more than just with your words, it's with your dollars too. So Sid, thanks again, bro. I appreciate you, and we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Brent.
Yes, sir.
And, I look forward to tuning into more episodes of Conversations with Brent and coming back as a guest again.
Hey, you heard it from the man himself. Tune in to Conversations with Brent. He will be back. Thanks for watching.